If you or someone you know is considering suicide, call the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline at 1-800-273-8255 or text the Crisis Text Line at 741-741.
And there's been no decline on kids reporting that they've been bullied. And that's after really significant efforts over the last decade, really. There's been no decline. There's also some recent research. These are called meta-analyses, where they look at a whole bunch of studies. And there have been 6 meta-analyses of bullying prevention programs. And what they've found is, so these are the programs that are people saying, hey, do this, you can stop bullying. And what they found is that they have minimal to no positive effect. And there's actually 0 effectiveness in any of the bullying prevention programs at the secondary level.
When you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change.
Hello and welcome to Awareness, a show that reveals the story beyond the headlines. It has been a quick 3 weeks for me, and I'm very happy to say that I'm coming to you from the new Awareness studio, and I'm grateful for your patience. So let's jump right in. Today we're going to reframe our perspective on bullying. We're going to change the way we look at this crisis. It's time we change our lens and look at bullying in context of social norms. Up until now, you have heard how devastating the effects of bullying can be on our kids. Mallory Grossman and the Grossman story is an example of the cruelty. You have also heard my encounter with bullying and the school's reaction. But it's now time that we shift our focus to understanding this phenomenon. On today's episode, you will hear a point of view that is much different than anything you have heard on the mainstream media. It took me a while to find this point of view, and I am happy that I'm able to share this with you. Today we are joined by Nancy Willard, author of the books Cyberbullying and Cyber Threats, Responding to the Challenge of Online Social Cruelty, Threats, and Distress, and Cyber Safe Kids, Cyber Savvy Teens, helping young people use the internet safely and responsibly. And finally, Cyber Savvy, Embracing Digital Safety and Civility. These books were published in 2007 and 2011 respectively. Nancy's book on cyberbullying was the first book published on this topic. With Nancy's help, the goal for today is to help you understand why it's not only the quote weak kids that get targeted, but also the strong, popular ones. Also, you will gain a different level of understanding about bullying behaviors and a possible explanation for their expression. For me, Nancy's information created a context and a deeper understanding about bullying that has helped me help my daughters. So put your thinking caps on, open your minds, and stay with me. Why is bullying such a problem? Why are kids so mean to one another? What is it that makes us conduct ourselves this way? Today we're going to examine one possible reason. An article written by Dr. Peter Stromberg for psychologytoday.com posted on June 8th of 2010 states, One of the puzzles faced by those who think about human evolution and our relationship to non-human primates is this. If we look at the social organizations of our closest relatives, the great apes, they are typically marked by strong dominance hierarchies. This is especially clear with our closest cousins, the chimpanzees. They live in groups in which dominant males rule the roost and control access to breeding females and other goodies such as choice foods. First of all, evolving tool and weapon technology would indeed have made it difficult to sustain chimpanzee-style dominance in proto-human groups, because weapons are equalizers. As an organization based on such dominance became less workable, something was needed to take its place. Human communities are indeed always based on powerful cultural mechanisms that sustain a certain level of peace and cooperation. These mechanisms include ostracism and ridicule, the moral rules of religions, and the range of probably uniquely human emotions, such as guilt and shame, that help keep us in line. However, these powerful mechanisms do not erase our biological heritage, so that we retain strong tendencies to try to dominate, to be willing to submit. Thus, our history, especially in the last 10,000 years or so, provides plenty of good examples of the reemergence of brutal competition and hierarchical groups following dominant leaders. Are we competitive or cooperative? Peace-loving or warlike? Democratic or authoritarian? The answer is that being human is precisely a matter of having tendencies, based in both biology and culture, that led us to all these things at the same time. When we look at the world today, this makes a certain amount of sense. Today we are going to look at bullying from a social dominance perspective. But first, let's find out about Nancy Willard.
My name's Nancy Willard, and I'm the director of a program. I call it Embrace Civility in the Digital Age. I'm sort of the epitome of not all who wander are lost, although we may appear to be so from time to time. I was a teacher of children with emotional challenges and burnt out and went to law school. Got involved in working with technology companies, computer software companies, and this was in the 80s. Got much more interested in what was happening with technology in schools and shifted back to education, focusing on education technology. And then the internet came in, and there was a need for somebody who understood youth risk behavior involving technology in schools, which also implicated legal issues like can you or can you not, can a school intervene in situations where there's off-campus speech? And short answer to that is yes. So I shifted to digital safety. I wrote the first book ever published in the world, actually, on cyberbullying. And I self-published that in 2006, but it got picked up by an academic publisher and was published in 2007. By frame of reference, Facebook was a college service in 2006, and in fall of 2006, they first became public. So I would say it's a gift, but it's also sometimes a challenge in that I tend to see the future and notice the patterns of what's going on pretty early in the cycles.
I asked Nancy if there was a specific reason why she made the shift to looking into technology.
Well, I was working with computer software companies providing legal services. I was also then being asked to come and talk to educators about copyright issues, primarily with these floppy disks, and got much more interested in what was happening with technology in schools. And I was also going to have to move to a larger city to continue my legal work, and so I decided to shift over. So I was involved at the very beginning as schools just started getting onto the internet. And then, as I said, there was a need for somebody who understood youth risk behavior, the legal issues, and technology in school. So I've been dancing in those circles for a while. After I wrote my book on cyberbullying, well, when I wrote that book, I always strive to focus on what the research says. And I realized that what educators were being told about bullying was inaccurate. And the way that they were being told to handle bullying wasn't going to be effective in the digital age. And so since that time, I've really been focusing on getting a better understanding of the whole range of hurtful behavior that young people can engage in and how to effectively be able to address that both in schools and to help parents empower their kids to effectively handle these situations.
I asked Nancy if she had any interest in bullying or experience with it before the advent of the internet.
Yeah, well, I went through junior high school as Weirdo Willard. So, yeah, we all have a background that attracts our interest to certain things. So, yes, I've had experiences with bullying, and that's what I saw. Okay, so here's one of the big problems and the reason why what schools are doing isn't working. Well, let me backtrack for a minute. What schools are doing to try to address bullying is not effective. There's no sign that it's being effective. There's a national survey that they conduct through the Center for Disease Control called the Youth Risk Behavior Survey. They added a question on bullying to that survey in 2009. So that's when kind of government started getting interested in figuring out what we could do about bullying. They've asked that question every other year, every 2 years, and there's been no decline on kids reporting that they've been bullied. And that's after really significant efforts over the last decade, really. There's been no decline. There's also some recent research. These are called meta-analyses, where they look at a whole bunch of studies. And there have been 6 meta-analyses of bullying prevention programs. And what they've found is, so these are the programs that are people saying, hey, do this, you can stop bullying. And what they found is that they have minimal to no positive effect. And there's actually 0 effectiveness in any of the bullying prevention programs at the secondary level. So there's a huge rethinking that needs to occur because it's not working. It's kind of Einstein's definition of insanity is if you keep doing the same thing over and over and get the same results, that's insanity. And that's what's happening in bullying prevention in schools.
Nancy explains what the current programs in schools are.
Most schools aren't using any bullying prevention programs. They aren't effective anyway. What most schools are doing now is simply following their state statute. So there was a big push during the Obama administration to make sure that every state had a statute that required school districts to have policies against bullying. So they say, okay, districts, you have to have a policy that's in your disciplinary code. So you prohibit students from engaging in bullying. and they have this really complicated definition of what bullying actually is. And then they, say that school staff need to supervise, and schools need to set up a reporting system so that if a student is being bullied, that student will report. And then the principal will investigate and determine whether or not he or she should impose consequences, sanctions, suspension. So here's why. I mean, this isn't the fault of schools. They're doing what they've been told to do. But then, so we say, if somebody's engaging in bullying, you should investigate and suspend that student. Well, suspensions are totally ineffective. They're a vacation to stay home and play video games. Okay, so suspensions don't change behavior. But the federal government also is saying, stop suspending students, the school to prison pipeline. So principals are told, if somebody's engaging in bullying, suspend that student, and then they're told, don't suspend students. So then they may be told to try a restorative practice. And what they end up trying is mediation, which will not be effective because you've got too much of an imbalance of power. The powerful kid who's being hurtful, and then the kid who's having challenges because somebody's hurtful to them. There's what's called an imbalance of power there. You try to do mediation with that, and you get fake contrition, forced apology, forced acceptance of the apology, and they walk away, and the kid who was complaining about being treated badly now gets called a snitch because the kid who was treating this student badly knows that nothing significant is going to happen. So what schools have been told to do isn't going to work. Now, I figured that out when I wrote the book on cyberbullying. Okay, you think it's not working in school? Let's try translating that approach to digital. Schools aren't making the rules for sites and apps. Adults aren't present in youth digital communities. Young people, even more, most of them don't report bullying anyway, but they really don't report what's happening with social media because they know that the initial reaction of adults is, oh, well, I'm going to take your cell phone away. And so they don't report. If they do report, and if some kind of punishment ensues, then it's possible for young people to engage in digital retaliation that's anonymous and brings in people that are outside of the control of the school. So this mistaken notion that adults have the ability to control these situations is just that. It's a mistake. It's not gonna work, and it's not working.
I asked Nancy if she thought it was worse now with the advent of social media and the internet playing a role.
There's no way to say whether or not it's worse. It's definitely more obvious. And because, it's in digital format. So it's definitely more obvious. Before the internet, young people could go home from school. I mean, when I was called Weirdo Willard, I would get home and I'd do fine. I could stay in my bedroom. Nobody was being hurtful to me. But if it were now and I was being bullied at school and I'd come home, I would likely also be bullied through social media. So there isn't an escape. The audience tends to be wider. So yeah, I guess you can say it's probably worse. Now we have to go back one other thing. There were two things that I said that I noted when I wrote my book. One was that the approach is just flat not going to work. The other is about the nature of bullying behavior. And this is really important for people to understand. For the longest time, and even now, the image of someone who engages in bullying is that this is somebody who has a lot of other risk factors. That we're talking about kids who are aggressive and violent and engage in other risk behavior and stuff like that. There are kids who fit that description, who have challenges and are hurtful. Usually they're the kids who are also having a hard time. They're the kids who have experienced trauma, live in stressful situations. They have challenges themselves. And so one of the things that happens because they have such challenges is that they also engage in hurtful behavior. But they are not the primary source of bullying. The primary source of bullying are kids who are considered popular and cool. And they're the ones who have good social skills. They are in leadership positions in the school. They're some often athletes. And these are young people who are being hurtful to achieve dominance. So this is ethological-based behavior. This is what we look at animals, and the analogy I make is chickens. Okay, so chickens will go after a weak chick and peck that weak chick to death. And then when they mature, roosters will get into cockfights that will draw blood. Now, the only difference between chickens and what's happening in middle school is that the hens are as vicious as the roosters. Actually, most women would tell you that the hens are probably even more vicious than the roosters. So this is ethological-based behavior. Some of the other things that are ethological-based is something that unfortunately happens pretty frequently online. It's called mobbing. And this also happens in the animal kingdom. Where an animal that was a member of the group somehow gets on the outs with somebody in the group, and the whole group turns against that animal. So we see mobbing among young people online. But another thing that you learn from animals is really interesting. I've been trying to figure out what makes, because some kids who are leadership kinds of kids exemplify good values. They are kind, compassionate, inclusive leaders. And then there are those who strive to be top dog by being hurtful to others. And they're either hurtful to those who are different, or they engage in battles with rivals. It's not entirely clear what causes young people to go on different paths. I happen to think family values is a real significant cause, as is the social environment in the school. And then unfortunately, we've got the social environment in society, and that's teaching young people to be hurtful to achieve dominance, especially in our current social functioning. It's modeling that. But one thing I learned once is that among wolves in wolf packs, there are actually two kinds of alpha wolves. There are the kind, wonderful, caring alpha wolves who take care of the whole family. And then there are the hurtful alpha wolves. Now, if you're an alpha wolf, eventually you're going to lose your alpha status because you're going to get old. And what happens is that the kind, compassionate alpha wolves stay within the pack and live a lot longer, whereas the mean alpha wolves, they get kicked out and they die. So even among some animal species, we've got this difference between kind and compassionate and inclusive and hurtful to achieve dominance. So the problem with schools is because the educators have been taught that those who engage in bullying are at-risk youth. And so the approaches they think they need to implement are grounded in risk prevention. Like, oh, well, let's teach empathy. Well, kids who are hurtful to achieve dominance have a significantly high level of empathy. They know exactly how to jab that knife into somebody's back, twist it ever so slightly, all outside of the detection of an adult. They've got great skills in empathy. This isn't risk behavior. This is dominance behavior. And the only way you can change dominance behavior is by focusing on the social norms. Is being hurtful to achieve leadership status an accepted norm within the school? And it's when you change those norms that you can change the dynamics in the school and reduce bullying.
After researching for over a year, story after story, people that are trying to raise awareness about bullying issues for some of their kids that have experienced bullying and some that have actually completed suicide have mentioned that the schools have a culture of bullying. So I asked Nancy if this is what she was referring to.
Yeah. And what we discover is that schools that function, the research indicates that schools that function in an authoritarian manner, so that the teachers are boss of the classroom and the principal's boss of the school, those schools have higher levels of bullying. Because what the staff are doing is modeling dominance behavior. Now, we also have risk behavior. It can be risk behavior, but it's primarily dominance behavior. And the failure to understand that is, and then the fact that educators are given such conflicting guidance on what they should do, the failure to understand that is why we're not achieving success. So what I'm trying to do is get schools to shift away from bullying prevention, trying to stop the negative, okay, because that tends to be more dominance related, to fully engaging students to foster positive relationships. So what we've got differences. We have an issue that we have to talk about. It's called social norms. So if the perceived social norms in a school are that being hurtful is the way to make it to the top, then that's how students are going to behave. But we also know from the research that the vast majority of young people are kind, are compassionate, are inclusive, and don't like to see their peers being hurtful. So there's a misperception of what the actual norms are. So there's an approach to address this kind of behavior. It's been used a lot to try to address binge drinking at the college level, and it's called the positive social norms approach. If you do a survey of students and find out that the vast majority of them don't engage in binge drinking and really kind of look down on those who do, and then you provide that information to students, then they are more apt to act in accord with what they now know the norms are. And some very savvy researchers implemented this approach in New Jersey. in some middle schools. And they went into the schools and they did a survey of the students. And they asked, hey, what do you think when you see your peers being hurtful? And guess what? The vast majority of students said, we don't really like to see that. Who do you admire? We admire those who are kind and compassionate, and we admire those who step in to help. And so you turn that information around, and what these researchers did, all they did is create posters. And they showed the students what their own data said. And they had a very effective decrease in reports of bullying. So if you put students if you identify the kind, compassionate, inclusive students and move them into leadership positions within the school, and then help all students gain skills in fostering positive relations, then I think that's a far better strategy than bullying is against the rule, report it, and you'll be punished. Now, I have a program I've created. It has not yet been fully implemented and evaluated, but it's thoroughly research-based. It's on my website. Anybody can go look at it. It's called Embrace Civility. And in that program, I have identified 5 areas of skills for young people. The first one is reach out. How can you reach out to be kind to help somebody else who's being treated badly, who's being left out, in conflict? The second one is say stop. How can you safely say stop to somebody who's being hurtful? And also, how can you help your friend who's being hurtful stop, own it, and fix it? Okay. The third is report concerns. When is it really serious? And you need to tell somebody who can step in to help, especially if somebody is talking about hurting themselves, taking their life. If there's a huge fight going on, that's the time to report. The fourth one is, and I haven't seen anybody who's talked about this, it's stop, own it, and fix it. We don't, everybody is hurtful from time to time. If you've made a mistake, if you've lost your temper, if you've been hurtful, how can you think, why would you stop? And how can you take personal responsibility, own it, and fix it? Take actions to remedy the harm. So that's a component. And then the fifth is be positively powerful. And those are strategies to help young people who are being bullied become more resilient. And there is research that documents that young people who have greater resiliency suffer less emotional harm if they're being bullied. So we really have to help young people learn to gain the skills of resiliency. We've had a number of completed suicides in our community, and several of them involved mobbing online. Adults can't stop mobbing, but one savvy, powerful youth can stop mobbing, can stop a mobbing situation from increasing. And I know this because my daughter did when she was a freshman in high school. She saw that a group of students were starting to, they were just launching after and starting to attack one particular student. It was on, this is a while ago, it was on MySpace, but it was, they created a group to attack this one student, and somebody told her about it, invited her to it. She got on there and she read them the riot act. Okay, she is my daughter. And she said, this is not acceptable. She was polite, but she said, this is absolutely not okay. You need to stop it. She also filed an abuse report with MySpace and copied everything, saved it, and made a copy for me and said, you need to go talk to the principal. And it was a very good principal. He was able to effectively intervene in a restorative manner and stopped it. So that's why it's so important to help build all kids' resilience and help them understand the things that they can do. Not all young people are going to have as much personal power as my daughter has. Not all young people will be in a position where they would feel safe stepping into a mobbing situation and telling people to stop, but they could get several friends and step in, or they can copy it and they can report what's happening to others. Young people need to step up, and they will step up if you just support their understanding that this is actually what people admire, and these are some skills that you can use to accomplish this.
It is very important to give our kids options. We need to coach them about the different ways to approach these situations. Nancy expands on the types of kids bullies target.
You've got kids who do have challenges, who have experienced, who have been excluded, have experienced different challenges in their lives, and they may respond by being hurtful to others. Then you've got the students who are seeking dominance, and they tend to be hurtful in two different ways. Sometimes they're hurtful to those who are perceived as different or deviant or of lower status, or they may engage in battles with rivals or perceived rivals. My research also indicates that I did a survey in 2015 of 1,500 middle and high school students across the country. And I asked them how frequently someone in the last month, somebody had been hurtful to them. And then I also asked them how frequently they had been hurtful. And what I found was that a significant number of students who reported that they had been hurtful also had experienced somebody being hurtful to them. So we've got a lot of bi-directional hurtful behavior going on. And this is, and that we've got to better address. I also asked the students who had admitted that they had been hurtful to think of the last time that they were hurtful and what they were thinking. What were your motivations? What was your logic? And the top two responses were very significant. The top response was, I was angry, and so I actually wasn't thinking. And then the second top was, this person had been hurtful to me. Okay? So what we've got here, if you combine those, and they were combined a lot, is impulsive retaliation. Okay? Now, when I was looking at this data, there was a headline in the New York Times: France bombs Syria in retaliation for attack. Gee, I wonder where young people are getting the idea that it's okay to engage in retaliation.
As mentioned earlier about the article that referenced tools and weapons being the equalizer. Well, social media has become a weapon that one can use to defend themselves.
Yeah. We've got now, when young people use digital technologies, there is a greater risk that they will engage in impulsive behavior. Okay? So the risk of impulsivity increases when you're using digital technologies. And so we've got a lot of that going on. We have a president whose wife said, if he gets hit, he's going to hit back 10 times harder. Yeah, okay. So also, in the survey that I did, I asked students, I gave them different descriptions of behavior and asked whether they admired somebody who did this, didn't admire somebody, or had mixed feelings. So they admired those who were kind, respectful, stepped in to help, were hurtful, but remedied the harm. They admired those kinds of students. They didn't admire those who were hurtful. The one answer that was mixed feelings was treated badly and retaliated. So even young people have mixed feelings about retaliation. So here's the way to stop retaliation. It's a 4-step process. First of all, requires self-regulation, so that if something happens, you don't immediately respond. You take the time to calm down. Second is keeping your own personal power. And this is really, really, really important for every parent to know how to explain to their child. If somebody is hurtful to you, the first thing you do is take a deep breath and commit to remaining calm. Then you stand tall, you hold your body in a powerful position, and you think to yourself, I choose not to let somebody else control how I feel about myself or respond. I will keep my personal power. Because if you break down, you're losing your power. Keep your power by standing tall and remaining calm, and walking away, or making just a quick comment that, just you need to stop, but I'm leaving. You don't lose your power. So to not retaliate, it's self-regulate, remain calm, keep your personal power. Then you have to understand that people can change and situations can change, and you have to believe that, you have to know that, which means that don't have just one choice of being hurtful back. There are ways to resolve this situation. And then the last thing that young people need to know how to do is to think things through. We need to stop always telling young people what to do. Although your kids are younger, you're still more in the telling stage, but especially as they become teenagers, but even as younger, what we have to do is help them engage in problem solving so that they can figure out for themselves what to do. And that's a real strong focus of my work is how do we help kids think things through? So thinking things through requires that you understand what the situation is. And then you figure out what your goal is. And then you think through several strategies you might be able to use, and then evaluate each strategy. What might happen if you did that? What might happen if you did that? What might happen if you did that? Are these in accord with your values? And then you pick the best strategy, or it might be two strategies combined. And you have to understand that the first thing you do might not work. That's why we have to have multiple strategies. And yeah, okay, first thing you did didn't work. Let's try again. How many versions of filaments did Edison use with the light bulb? The first thing you do might not work, but you can come up with some more strategies. So teaching young people how to engage in the thinking things through and the problem solving is so important.
As parents, we are role models to our kids. Every move we make is being analyzed for acceptable behavior. How we use social media, how we react to someone testing our last nerve. We need to be cognizant that our kids are modeling us every time they are around.
Modeling is so important. And modeling not only digitally, because they may not see what you're doing, but modeling when you're in the grocery store, when somebody is the cashier is looking at them kindly, speaking with them politely, the whole manner in which adults treat others, especially in front of their children, that's what their kids are learning.
Our emotions are very powerful tools we have to deal with the world around us. Likewise, we have the ability to express those emotions in many different ways. We need to use our behaviors as tools to enforce positive outcomes. We need to teach our kids this power and practice what we preach.
Yeah. There was one study just modeling kindness and encouraging young people to be kind, especially those who have more challenges in friendships and peer acceptance. They did a study where they had two groups of kids, divided them randomly, and they said to this group, okay, what we want you to do is reach out to be kind to another person 3 times a day. And there was a significant increase in the level of peer acceptance. So the simple act of reaching out to be kind makes such a difference in our own feelings of well-being and in the lives of others and in our acceptance. It's a funny thing. You reach out to be kind and people kind of like you.
At this point in the conversation, I shared with Nancy the story about the girl who told my daughter she wanted to kill herself. You heard this story on the last episode. The conversation now turns to what happens when bullying is reported to the schools.
What's happening when these situations are reported to the schools? We touched it briefly in that what the schools do is they shift from resolving these situations to trying to figure out if they should punish something. Now, you just told me a story where the principal did a really good job in resolution, it sounds like. What the evidence is that the vast majority of young people don't report these situations to the school, even if these are happening repeatedly and they're feeling really upset. They tend not to report. There are numerous studies that say that young people don't think that schools handle these situations very well. And there's 2 studies. One is mine and one is a similar, one is another study. They were done in 2 different ways, but both of us asked young people who had been bullied frequently and were feeling distressed whether or not they reported. And what we both found, even though we had conducted the studies in a different way, our data is almost identical. We found that a third of the students, only a third of the students said that they reported to the school. And after they reported, things got better about a third of the time, stayed the same about a third of the time, and got worse about a third of the time. So that translates out, doing my math, to about a 10% effectiveness rating. And so that's the other huge thing that we've got to engage schools with in a better manner is improving the way that they handle these situations. And in my opinion, what we have to do is shift from this disciplinary mode approach to a more comprehensive approach. We have to determine if any of the involved kids have other challenges that they need some help in addressing, and help increase their resilience. Second, we need to see if there are any protections that need to be put into place for any student who's being treated badly. And third, we need to engage those students who are hurtful in a process to help them get to the point where they accept personal responsibility, and then they need to engage in problem solving to figure out how they are going to remedy the harm to the student who they were hurtful to. And fourth, we also have to have an intervention with the students who are supporting the one who is being hurtful, because they're as much players as the most obvious one being hurtful. We need to engage the students who are supporters also in problem solving, in getting to the point where they accept personal responsibility and then problem solving to remedy the harm. And we need to have schools consider whether there's anything going on in the environment that might be contributing to this. For example, are there any staff members who are being hurtful? Or are staff members ignoring this? Or are there changes that need to be made based on the fact that students of a certain protected class, like LGBT or Muslim or Hispanic students, are being treated badly? Are there changes that need to be made to the environment? And lastly, there's the need for ongoing evaluation. If you intervene in a situation, the principal needs to follow up and make sure that the intervention was effective.
Nancy has some resources on her website for educators. All the links will be in the show notes.
On my website, I've got videos for educators that are for professional development. They can, in most states, get professional development units by watching these and then responding to some questions that I send them. And then I have a book, and it outlines this kind of restorative problem solving, resilience building, restorative intervention.
Nancy Willard leaves us with some final thoughts.
Okay, I truly believe that if we shift our thinking as adults and as educators on these issues, we will have the ability to engage students and empower them to foster more positive relationships. I truly believe that we can accomplish this, and that our young people have the ability to step forward and make this world a more peaceful, kind place.
This theory fits in well with what's going on when it comes to bullying. Is it the answer? Time will tell. All I know is that the bullying phenomenon is a very complex one that is ripping at the fabric of our kids' childhood and taking them from us in frightening numbers. We need to continue to do what we can to understand this. And in the meantime, we need policies, procedures, and laws to help stop the bleeding. We need good people in place to help enforce them until we can get to the root cause of this issue and put it to an end. In 2 weeks, we conclude the bullying series with a message of empowerment. When I began researching this topic, I asked myself this question: how do we help our kids if they are going through a bullying situation? Well, I found an answer to that question, and I will be bringing it to you next time. You know, Diane Grossman mentioned in our discussion that the one regret that she had was not getting Mallory professional mental and emotional support. In 2 weeks, you will have a guide for beginning emotional and mental support for your kids. A special thanks to Nancy Willard for joining me today. You can find all her contact information at awarenesspodcast.com under the Guest tab. I would also like to thank Dr. Samir Hinduja for referring Nancy to me. And that's going to do it for this episode. If you want to give feedback on the episode, find the podcast on social media, Twitter and Facebook. There is also a Facebook group on bullying, and everyone is welcome. You can find all the links in the show notes. After each of the episodes, I post my thoughts on the bullying discussion group, so check it out. The awareness theme intro music was provided by Shane Yoder and his team at puttheminasong.com. I want to say thanks to all who listen and share the podcast. And I want to give a special thanks to my family for giving me the strength to do this. Their support allows me to do this for you, and I am truly grateful. Until next time, stay aware, be aware, and I'll talk to you soon.